church planting can be exciting, but also extremely hard and discouraging. And to make sure that you do not feel alone, we want to share with you 5 common discouragements in year 1 of church planting.
Welcome back to Practical Church Planting, where in 15 minutes or less, we'll give you practical tips, advice, and encouragement to help you plant and grow healthy churches. My name is Brian Androsian, and joining me today and every day of this podcast is Dylan Dodson, and today we're talking about 5 common discouragements that you'll face year 1.
Yeah, so I don't know if we've said this before, or I was talking to someone recently. I've heard before, like, church planting doesn't get easier, it just gets different. It doesn't get any easier. It's just always difficult, and pastoring is difficult. And yeah, I mean, like any job, there's difficulties there, but I don't agree. I don't know who I was talking to this recently. But anyway, I was at the church planter. I don't agree. I do believe that the first couple of years are the hardest. Like launch phase, the first year or two, struggling to make it. Like, there's difficulties with every phase, but like, there's just the pressure of like, my family going to have a job? Do I have to quit? Like, like there's just something unique to that. And so there's a lot of difficulties in the beginning, especially the first year, which means there's a lot of discouragements. So we want to share some of these so you don't feel like you're by yourself, because I guarantee you everyone else has felt this way. Yeah. Or just so you know, when you do plant a church, these don't take you by surprise. And
it sounds like after 2 years, it's just a cakewalk, and church planting's no big deal, right?
Yeah. It's just not as difficult. Right, well, I don't even know what I'm saying. It's hard. It's always hard. First year is the hardest, in my opinion, and here are some of the discouragements as to why that's the case. Or I would at least say you feel these maybe more in the first year because you're not used to them. Yeah. So number 1 is declining attendance. So, I mean, there's different models of how you launch, whatever, but typically when you have your first launch Sunday, however you want to say it, you have the most amount of people, and then it just goes down. And maybe Easter or some other nice thing, Christmas, it has like a little blip. But typically you start and it goes down and it goes down and it goes down. Maybe 6 to 9 months. Yeah. And no matter how large it is, like, you always kind of compare to how you started. So let's say you started with 500 people, which is unlikely.
You're right.
And you drop down to 250. Well, most people would be like 250 people in the first year. That's incredible. Yeah. I mean, that's 50%. Yeah. If you start with 100 people and you go down to 50, like for us, we had 100. I mean, you just remember these things. We had 107 on our launch Sunday, and we ended up settling around like 50. Yeah. And so that was discouraging for a long time. So just knowing that it's going to happen, it doesn't make it not hard, but know that that is a normal thing. It's not necessarily a reflection of you or your preaching or your leadership or anything like that. It's that people are coming to check it out. A lot of times in the first few months, you have well-wishers that we're never going to connect anyway, but you do still count them as attendance. And so it can be really easy to feel like there's something wrong with you, or that your church isn't being faithful, or you guys are doing something wrong, when reality is that's just the common thread for 99.9% of church plants. You will decline as people kind of get connected and figure out what's going on. As you figure out what's going on, because a lot of church planters, it's your first time, you don't know what you're doing either. Yeah. Just know that's going to happen, and it does stink, but it's not because there's something wrong with you. It happens to pretty much everyone.
Yeah, I think this is, I feel like, especially if you've gone through some church planter training or assessment, you know this is the case, or you know it's going to happen, but I still feel like it's hard to swallow. Like, I remember our first year, we track attendance, obviously, and that trend line on our attendance was pretty solidly going down for a little while. But, the first week was good, 107 people. And I haven't even looked at it in a while, but I feel like the next couple weeks were still.
Well, then 2 weeks after that was Easter.
That's right. So it stayed high for at least a tiny little bit. So I feel like I remember us kind of thinking, or maybe not you, but myself thinking, like, I know it's going to drop, but maybe not, like, this is actually, and then when it did, it's like, oh yeah, this is reality. Yep. And it's just, even, no matter how much it's coming, it's a bummer, but it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming.
Yeah. And it's not a big deal. Like, it's not a bad thing.
It doesn't make it not hard, but just know that it's not a sign on you or your church. It's the reality of it. Yep. Number 2 is the financial pressure. Now, again, there's always financial pressure. Yeah. But hopefully the financial pressure is not always, are we going to close? Hopefully it transitions to maybe paying staff or building or mission stuff, whatever. And there's still things to pray about, and that's still hard and can consume you if you're not careful. But it's not the same as like, is this going to close? We launched in April of 2017. January of 2017, we had our budget projection. We were supposed to be out of money by September, October, completely out of money, which is bad. Yeah,
that's not a long time.
Now, thankfully, God was great, and we had some really generous people. That didn't happen. But there's just, like, for me and my own thing, probably the first 12 to 18 months, constantly like, okay, where this thing's closing. Yeah. And then it shifts a little bit. Of course, it still happens every once in a while. But there's just a financial pressure that you will experience. And I know we want to say, like, oh, well, you're going to trust God, but it's still hard knowing that, like, that's a job, and if it doesn't work out, like, it really is going to impact you. And so knowing doesn't necessarily mean you don't have faith. It's just a reality for pretty much every church planter, the financial pressure, especially if you don't have churches like large church donors supporting you and launching you out, is pretty scary.
Yeah. I mean, in that first year when I don't have it all in front of me, obviously, but we were supposed to run out of money by September, October, whatever it was, and then once that didn't happen, we kind of redid it. We were supposed to run out of money by another time, and it just kept it kept being pretty uncertain, but still working for a while until obviously now we're at a point where we're like,
I feel like now it's the same. It's just the deadline is just farther away.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and what happened with us, and I think what happened with a lot of people is we didn't have. Like after when we figured out that's when we would run out of money, we didn't all of a sudden have all of a sudden the whole church just rose up and giving was never an issue again. We had little things that were totally the grace of God where someone would come in and, whatever, we'd give one donor that would end up increasing their giving by a lot, and it kind of pushed things out even further. And then someone else would, so it was never just like, I don't know how to say it, but it was never just like, everything changed, but it was totally the grace of God where like little things happened that kept things moving along until we got to a more stable position.
Yeah. So that's hard. So declining attendance, financial pressure. Number 3, launch team leaving. Everyone says this is going to happen, and it does happen. I feel like sometimes I don't have a heart. We talked about this before. I'm an Enneagram 8, so like I don't really take things very personally.
Right.
But it still happens. Like now we live in Raleigh, so people come and go. People come more than they go, but we've had, I don't know, from our initial launch team, we had like maybe 20, 25 adults. Mm-hmm. 5, 6, 7 are still here.
Right. Yeah.
A couple moved away. Like we had 2 families leave our church, which surprisingly, it didn't. We won't go into it here. They didn't hurt my feelings. Yeah. I was confused by one, but it didn't hurt my feelings. And I read a book last week that said pretty much the average or the statistic that says that by year 5, none of your launch team will still be with your church.
Wow.
The vast majority of church plants, if they make it 5 years, and I'm looking at ours and I was like, that actually could happen. Like other than you and Brittany, like the people that are still around, my mom, shout out to my mom, one family, Adam, who we're hoping to plant, not going to be here. Like I don't, and one of my friend named Chris, there'll be 5 of us in 5 years, hopefully. I mean, that we're there from like the launch phase.
Yeah.
And so I think people that were here launch Sunday will still be around, but like the launch phase. And so just know that that's going to leave. And sometimes it's going to be hurtful. Like we didn't have anyone leave that like I super invested in a ton. And so like it broke my heart type of thing. It was just different reasons. But people are going to leave, whether it's for good reasons, bad reasons, it still stinks because you're trying to build something. People move away. People stop coming for whatever reason. And again, reading it in that book last week, I was like, oh, that's really encouraging to know, again, that it's not necessarily on you. That God uses different people at different seasons to do different things. And most launch teams don't actually stay for the long term. Yeah,
it's true. And I mean, the situations, I mean, obviously people moving, no hard feelings, people move, life happens, whatever. But there will be times where people leave because of things that if you weren't Dylan and had a heart would be hurtful. I mean, not necessarily things that just happened to us, but just in general, like it'll happen where disagreements happen or things didn't turn out in the church the way that they thought it was going to be when they joined the launch team, and it'll hurt. But I mean, this is true. This is our, Dylan saying we're not going to go anywhere, but this is our 3rd church plant, and obviously we left both of those. I mean, one we moved, and the other one was different reasons, but we were launch team for both of those, and we're not with them. So it's true. It's going to happen.
Regardless of the reason. It's still discouraging to know that there's people leaving as you're trying to build momentum and make this thing work. Know that it will happen. It's not on you or because of you, although maybe sometimes. But generally speaking, it happens to everybody, even though it's discouraging. Number 4, the difference between theory and reality. This probably is my favorite. It's probably not the right thing to say. But I've just noticed, and personally, I've noticed a trend when I've talked to planters that are about to plant, and then 6 months after they plant, their attitude, how different it is. Especially, I mean, if they're younger, like I was, like you don't have as much experience, probably even more drastic change. But the theory, the practice, here's the discipleship, here's what's going to happen, here's how we're going to serve the community. And then you realize like how life, and it's not knocking our people. Like our people are busy. I don't like that word. They have a lot going on.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a lot of it, in my experience, has to do with the leadership of the church, actually moving people, because we are called to be leaders. And so if our people aren't doing anything we want them to do, it might not be on them.
Yeah.
But there's just theory and reality are really different. And it takes a while to kind of cope with that, especially if you just don't have a ton of experience. And realizing, how do I actually lead everyday people who have jobs and kids and worries, and we're all sinful, It's just different. And so you will be discouraged wondering why all these things you read about didn't, because everybody shares their highlights, whether it's a book or a class or whatever. Like, it wasn't like that for everybody, that all the success stories. There were some, it's just different. And so adjusting the reality between what you thought was going to happen or the theory can be discouraging because it's not always the same. Yeah,
this is a tough thing when you go to, if you're a person who goes to a lot of conferences and things like that, like you get the huge success stories that are the 1 in a million. Like, and it's easy to think, I could, and even like to lay out a plan. I'm going to do all these things. I feel like a big one is we're going to serve the community in these ways. That is a great thing, and some do, but it's just we have these ideas that are way more grand in our mind than will actually be in reality. And you realize that your entire team or your entire church, whether it's a launch team or if you've launched, are not full-time pastors. Like everyone doesn't have the drive for these things that you do, which can be tough. But I mean, it's not a negative thing towards anybody. It's just the reality of it. So wrapping your head around that once it actually happens can be tough.
Yeah, again, not everyone's going to want to sign up for a group. Not everyone's going to serve. Not everyone's going to give. And that's not necessarily because they don't love Jesus less.
Right.
Part of it is they need to be mature, but part of it is God has called different people to do different things. And there's a big difference between theory and reality. And so it's discouraging when things don't go as how you thought you would in your mind. But just know that that's true for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's just about how do you adjust knowing the reality of your church, because all churches are different, contexts are different. Just being able to lead and to pastor through those things is hard the first year, but it's, you learn it as you go.
Yep.
So there's a difference between the theory and reality. That's number 4. Number 5, you're like, what is before after church? These notes. I still to this day can remember. I mean, it was not that long ago, so that doesn't really mean much. 18 months ago,
back in the day.
I still remember. Saturday nights or Sunday mornings, driving in, being like, man, is anyone going to show up?
Oh yeah.
Are we going to do anything? And then, especially the first year, getting in my car to leave, and I was like, what are we doing? And it's not just about like numbers. I mean, obviously when you're declining, it's discouraging, but it's like, are you making any difference? Is anybody going to come? Is the church going to survive?
Yep.
There's a lot of typically it's like, oh, Sunday, like I studied and I preached and I'm going to go home and just rest. I did the best that I could. It's like a lot of like, man, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Or like just being, I remember a lot, like probably like the 6 to 10 month mark, like those 4 months in there, we were declining, kind of plateaued of our decline, which was, I guess, is good. If you don't know at a time, you think you're going to keep going down. But we were all trying hard. We were doing stuff. Like we had these goals as a staff. And like it just seemed like, what are we doing? Like nothing was working. And being so discouraged as I left on Sundays. And also Saturday night, Sunday mornings being like I don't even, I mean, but part of it is a pride thing because you don't want to preach to like an empty room, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's like, is anyone going to be there? Like I remember, probably about a year into it, it was our anniversary, Easter, whatever. Like we actually, like knowing that there was going to be at least people every week was like a really cool thing. And then we went to 2 services and it happened again a little bit. Because I was like, like, oh, well, like no one's going to be, a service is going to be super awkward. Do we even need 2 services? And now it's to the point where like every week it's like, no, this is like, I look forward to it because I know, not that it's going to be packed out, but I know that it's going to be like, there's going to be people here. And there's going to be good conversations and I'm going to be able to see some friends. And we're going to actually have, as of this recording, this week we're starting our Thursday services. I'm not as nervous because it's a completely different thing. And like if it doesn't work, whatever. But I just remember the before and after church on Sundays, when our first year was really difficult and really discouraging, some of the most discouraging times. And so just don't be surprised when that happens because it probably will.
Yeah, and I think one thing that can be really tough about that is there's an element of, obviously you need to be truthful and sharing things you're going with people, but you gotta lead and be optimistic in front of people. Like if you show up bummed and no one's going to show up today, and if hardly anybody shows up, then after service before you leave, it's visible on your face how discouraged you are. To anyone walking by you, it's going to make it that much worse. So there's a tension of you're feeling these things, and you have to share things with somebody. You can't bottle everything up, but also you have to be able to lead and put on a face I don't think this is going to be this way forever.
And the good news is people are not examining the room like you are. Like
true.
You think
that's very true. Yeah.
But it's just good to know, like, as excited as you are to plant the church, unless you have a big like sending church and all that sort of thing, you're gonna feel some discouragement. But keep going. What's ironic is like after the first couple of years are the good old days after a while, even though they were actually terrible if you can remember back to them. I mean, it was good, but it was also really hard. But if you can get through it, it's the times you'll look back and laugh. We tried this. This didn't work. Do you remember we had the service? I remember like 8 weeks in, it was like the end of May, someone walking into our auditorium, literally asking the question, are we even having church today? I still remember that today. Because for whatever reason, like it was just like super low relative to where we had been. Yeah. And you'll laugh about it later, but it's really hard. But I would just say keep persevering because it's hard for everybody.
Yeah. What's the quote from The Office? Like, wish you knew you were in the good old days or when you're in them or something. Exactly. I don't know. You're in the good old days.
It's
That's
hard.
Right.
You're in it. Don't get discouraged because you see all the church plants on social media blowing up. That's not the normal story.
Yep.
Normal story is first year is really hard. It's like having a baby. First year is really hard. Doing anything for the first time is really hard.
Totally.
But you learn and you grow through it. So those are 5 common discouragements in year 1. Thanks for being with us, and we'll be with you next time on Practical Church Planning. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Practical Church Planning. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or Practical Planning, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you like or subscribe or do whatever it's telling you to do or should do on that platform.
And hey, if you are so tired of looking at our ugly faces, but you're not tired of listening to our beautiful voices, then you can find our podcast if you just search Practical Church Planning on iTunes or Google Play. Make sure not to just find it, not just to listen, but to subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. Brian, tell them to subscribe.
Subscribe.
See you next time.